ESPN's Buster Olney, thanks to All-Star Wine and Spirits with Armin and Levac, 104.5, the team every Thursday. Buster, last night, Joe Girardis pulled out all the stops to try to win that game. He showed high urgency, as you worded it today in your blog. Should he have?
No. Their chances for making the postseason are 99.5%. Jupiter has to align with Mars, and a hurricane has to come along, and 15 other things have to happen for the Yankees to not make the playoffs. And that's why I thought it was a surprise that Joe managed the game the way that he did, where, he again, going to Dellin Betances for an inning and a third, going to Andrew Miller for 2 innings. He managed it like it's the wild card game, and it wasn't the wild card game. They're still in a position where if they win today, they're in. They win Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they're in. If any of the team chasing them, the Angels, were to lose, they're in. They have a lot of different routes to this, and I thought big picture, it would have been better for him to kind of hold back on using these 2 guys at the back end of the bullpen. Think about this number. Andrew Miller this year has 4 appearances of 2 innings. 3 of those 4 have happened in the last 19 days. Dellin Betances has thrown 5 more innings than any other reliever in baseball. Those 2 guys rank 5th and 6th, respectively, in most innings thrown by relievers in the month of September. This is not the way it should be for the Yankees.
Well, Buster, that brings up my next question. The Yankees' strength for most of this season, even going into the season, we all went, "Ooh, that bullpen." Is that not the case? Is it still a strength, or is it a weakness now? Well,
it definitely is a strength if those guys are okay. If those guys are throwing the way that they're capable of. But as we talked about in recent weeks, Betances' performance has eroded in the second half. He's having a harder time throwing strikes, and you have to believe some of it is related to the fact that he's been pitched so much. They are going to have Adam Warren, added to their bullpen, at least for the wild card game. That'll give them more length between Warren and Wilson and Betances and Miller. That's a pretty good group. In fact, you could probably match that group against any in baseball. But the Yankees don't have many advantages over some of the teams that are going to be in the playoffs in the American League, and that's why I've thought all along they should absolutely do everything they can to protect the one part of the team that might be better than the bullpens of other teams.
ESPN's Buster Olney with Armin and Levac getting ready for ESPN's game tonight. Red Sox, Yankees, 7:05 first pitch. Buster, last night Tanaka did not look good. Is he still the most intimidating pitcher the Yankees have?
I think he's the best option for the wild card game, and I agree with you. He didn't look good initially, and then he got better. It was going along because he hasn't pitched in a while. I thought that he got more comfortable as time went along, and I think it's good that he got on the mound before that start. But when you think about some of the other guys you could start, Michael Pineda, on his best days he's great, and then he has some days when he's absolutely terrible. I think with Luis Severino, you love the stuff, but you wonder how he would respond to that sort of stage. I think, it's smarter for them to hold him back and use him perhaps in a relief situation, in the wild card game rather than have him make that start. I think because of Tanaka's experience and because he's a guy who wants the ball in a big situation, he's the guy you want on the mound. And I'll never forget the story that Casey McGee told me about Tanaka pitching in the Japan World Series before he signed with the Yankees. He threw in Game 6. It was a complete game, and they were going to play Game 7 the next day. And Casey McGee's watching Tanaka get stretched out the next day, and he's looking at him going, Are you really going to pitch tonight? And he said, if we have the lead, I'm getting the ball. And he did, and that's the mentality you'd want in a wild card game.
That's awesome. Getting the Yankees to the postseason and beyond is going to be a lot to do with these young guys like Severino and Bird and even Heathcott to a degree. Does Rob Refsnyder make this roster, and should he?
I think he will, because, let's face it, one of the big issues for the Yankees, and it's being exploited by the Red Sox, as we've seen this week, is they have such difficulty against left-handers. And I think that, they like what they've seen in this platoon so far, with Refsnyder playing second base with Dustin Ackley. And they're looking for any way at this point to get offense, because let's face it, and maybe this is the reason why Joe Girardi was playing with a high degree of urgency. He needs to get Brian McCann 2 or 3 days off. He needs to get Brett Gardner some time off and Chase Headley. And, if those guys get some time off, maybe their offense gets better, but they can't count on that, and that's why they've given Refsnyder the shot, and he's taken advantage of it so far. It got to the point where he looked so good at the plate last night, I was actually surprised when they had that bunt situation and they asked him to lay the ball down rather than just let him swing away.
ESPN's Buster Olney. Thanks to All-Star Wine and Spirits. We are live right now from Spare Time in Clifton Park for Bud Light Super Bowl send-off at 6:45 today. We are getting a qualifier to go to the Super Bowl with us. How about them apples? Hey, Buster, Red Sox, they're doing damage against the Yankees right now. You feel like they're going to be a force to reckon with and bounce back next year?
No doubt about it. It's hard to look at a team that's been viewed as, generally speaking, a failure this year and already say, wow, they're a great candidate for a bounce back. But they've gotten a lot of answers that they can build on going forward. Certainly the play of Jackie Bradley Jr. has been outstanding since he came back. And I was actually this afternoon talking with a Red Sox executive who said, we expected him to be good all along. It's just taken a little longer than we thought. Well, now that you've got him and Xander Bogaerts, who's flirting with 200 hits this year and has been rock solid at shortstop defensively, and Mookie Betts, who's now hitting for power with those great wrists that he has in his swing, and you've got the experience of Blake Swihart, who's gotten behind the plate, and you have Christian Vasquez, who's a terrific defensive catcher coming back next year from Tommy John surgery. That's a pretty good core group, and they've also have turned around Rick Porcello and Joe Kelly before he got hurt, and we've seen Eduardo Rodriguez, what he can do. They've got some moves to make. I think they've got some real decisions to make on whether or not they're going to find some deal to move Pablo Sandoval, but I think the core is in place for them to come back pretty quickly.
All right, so we'll worry about the Red Sox in next year's wild card, but oddly enough, I don't want to talk about that, Buster.
That's so weird. Yeah.
But this year's wild card, how do you see this thing playing out? Because it's coming down to the wire.
Yeah, and then don't ask me to predict it, okay? Because I mean, we're talking about three flawed teams, and the Astros and how they're doing. The Minnesota Twins are not a great team. The Angels are completely banged up. They just lost their closer, Houston Street. They don't know if Jared Weaver is, how much he can pitch down the stretch. The one good thing is they got the best player on the planet, Mike Trout, and he's playing well. And that probably is a big advantage. And it has been interesting to see how Albert Pujols has bounced back toward the end of the year. If I'm picking a team today, I think if you look at the schedule ahead, you'd probably say the Astros would be the favorite. But there's just something about the way the Angels have gone about the business and their experience that makes me think that they're going to be the team to pull it out.
Yankees still host them?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the Yankees are in great shape when you look at it. Now, I know it's in New York, and everyone, has a tendency to want to push the panic button, but that when you have a gap of that size with these few days to go, you're in a great position, and they'll wind up hosting the wild card game.
ESPN's Buster Olney hoping the Mets host a divisional. The Mets, 2 injuries of concern, Buster. Cespedes got the x-rays that are negative after being hit by the pitch last night on the hand. Steven Matz with the continued back issues. How big are those 2 injuries when we look at the Mets and their postseason run?
Well, I think Cespedes is certainly the one to watch in that regard because we know that the Mets' preference is to pitch Steven Matz, and they prefer that he be in the rotation with Colon out. But if anything affects his use, then they have a good stopgap. They have a good fallback position. So I don't think that's as big. I think Cespedes obviously has been a huge part of the lineup for the Mets, especially because in playing the Dodgers, likely in 3 of the 4 games, first 4 games, they would see a left-hander. Clayton Kershaw to start, either in Game 1 or Game 2, and then you have Alex Wood, and then you have Brett Anderson. And you want to load up with a good right-handed lineup. And, Cespedes hasn't been as good in recent weeks as he was early on, but he's been pretty darn good. The one thing anytime I hear about a player getting a hand or wrist injury and you hearing that the X-rays came back negative, my response is, well, let's just wait and see, because so many times you'll hear something in a few days where they'll say, well, it's not feeling any better, and then they go back in and they do a bone scan and there's a crack or there's some small fracture. So you hope that's not the case with Cespedes.
Blue Jays clinched the AL East for the first time since '93, and I'm reading your blog, and you point out their run differential is plus 229, almost 100 runs better than the Cardinals. How much should other teams be afraid of Toronto and their offense?
To me, they are the prohibitive favorite to come out of the American League at this point. And some of the run differential numbers, which of course is how many more runs you've scored than you've given up, their run differential their run differential is 136 points better than the second place team in the American League. Okay, 136 runs better. In the history of baseball, there have been 15 teams that can say they were 130 runs or better in run differential, and out of those 15 teams, 12 went on to win the World Series. That's pretty daunting. And when you think of, too, that a lot of that run differential, I believe out of the 229 that the Blue Jays have put up, something like 140 of that is since they made those trades in July. So in 2 months, their run differential is actually 30% better than what the 98 Yankees did.
That's incredible stuff. ESPN's Buster Olney with Armin and Levac. Thanks to All-Star Wine and Spirits. Buster, today at your blog, ESPN.com, you wrote a column about Cubs ace Jake Arrieta. He's been one of the best stories of the regular season. In the postseason, can he pitch the Cubbies to the World Series, man?
Yeah, in fact, when I turn in my picks next week, I'm just going to affirm what I did before the season. I had the Pirates winning the World Series, and I think that if you were to have an NCAA style play down where you had every team play a certain amount of games in a series, like 5 games, then I think that you would see the Pirates win. They're the best team in baseball right now. They're a great team, but here's the problem: they have to beat Jake Arrieta, and his performance in the last 2 months is something that I've never seen from any pitcher ever. And that includes, Roger Clemens and Pedro Martinez, and name anybody you want. But when you're talking about a guy who in the last 9 weeks has allowed 4 earned runs in 9 weeks, he has a 0.44 ERA in that time. He's allowed 4 home runs in 4 months. So it's not, certainly when the Yankees played the Red Sox a decade ago and Pedro Martinez was at his best, there was always a sense with the Yankees that, okay, we got to rope-a-dope it, run up his pitch count, maybe it'll be 1-1, 2-2, you get into the 8th inning when you get him out of the game, and then you go to work. For the Pirates, I think the challenge is even greater going up against Arrieta, because he just is flat-out unhittable. The Pirates have seen him in 36 innings this year. He's allowed 18 hits and 3 runs in 36 innings. And scouts I talk to say that, the Pirates have to concede something to him, basically say, you know what, we're going to just look for a pitch on one side of the plate and try to hit it the other way and stop trying to drive the ball out of the park.
Hey, Buster, you've critiqued baseball players before about how there's the unwritten rule you can't show emotion on the field and everybody gets uptight about it. But yet baseball players party like none other when it comes to clinching a spot in the postseason. What is your feelings on the champagne celebrations this time of year?
I think just have fun with it. The stopping point would be when you put somebody at risk physically. Like I did think it was interesting last night, Marcus Stroman, who, I'm excited for him because he came back from that terrible injury in spring training and he's back. And then I was watching the video last night of him doing this dance on this sort of beer-slicked floor in Baltimore, and I was concerned. And, you say, that's fine, just make sure you don't get hurt, because we certainly have seen examples of that. But I mean, so many of those unwritten rules I just find to be ridiculous, and I think we saw some evidence of that, or an example of that, with the whole Harper and Papelbon thing.
All right. Hey, Buster, it's just you and me. Nobody else is here, man.
Oh, boy.
Hey, CC get it done tonight? What do you think?
I don't think it's a good matchup for him. I think the Red Sox are red hot, and I think that you and Joe Girardi can double up on your panic.
But you still feel like we shouldn't panic because they have plenty of time. That's what you told us.
You know what might happen? They might lose tonight. As I say, I don't think it's a good matchup for CC, and then an hour later they might find out that because other teams lost, they clinched.
Yeah, but a 4-game sweep from the Red Sox of all teams, come on.
Yeah, and if you win the wild card game next week behind Tanaka, how much would you be thinking about that?
Nobody cares. Yep, that's a good point.
It depends how often I look at my Twitter.
Okay, calm down. ESPN's Buster Olney. Catch him tonight. ESPN's coverage of Yankees, Red Sox. Buster, we love you, man. We'll do it again next week.
Sounds good, guys. Take care.